When I went to school, I was almost always one of the youngest in my class. And that's just because it's not because I was super advanced or anything, but it's because my birthday falls at the end of the year. I actually share a birthday with the devil. Christmas. Justin Trudeau, for those who don't know, is also born on Christmas Day, which sucks. But nonetheless, that is something that I've cherished my entire life until I found out that he also shares that day. But the point of this story that I'm trying to make is because I've always been the youngest, I think I've always taken just these little pot shots at people that are older. So when I was a younger teenager, I'd say, wow, when you're in your 20s, you're so old. Or when I was in my 20s, I'd say, wow, when you're in your 30s, you're so old. Only old people say back in my day. Only old people say, oh, when I was younger. Only old people say I used to walk uphill 2 times there and back through a snowstorm to get to school. And now I'm finding myself in that position because back in my day, when I was growing up in this country, I did not experience a tremendous amount of terrorism here in Canada or really across the world. I know there have been terrorist attacks. One of the biggest ones, obviously, that stands out is, the Boston Marathon bombing, 9/11. But here in Canada, we've been relatively a safe country. Maybe different parts of Canada have varied and, different income neighborhoods have varied. But for the most part, people would be able to play hockey in the streets. You see a car, everyone yells car, they move the nets, and then they continue playing hockey. That's just kind of like the stereotypical Canada that I think a lot of people remember. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my memory of Canada. And now we're dealing with a version of Canada where there are terrorist threats every single day. Yesterday, we just talked about one on this channel, but also the extra channel because there was an additional update to the 100 plus hospitals that all had simultaneous bomb threats issued to them at 5 a.m. But now there are more bomb threats that are happening, more terrorist threats that are happening across Canada. And it just feels like shit is getting so tense. Whether these actually turn out to be real things that someone needs to go in and defuse a bomb, or whether they're just a bunch of foobar that someone is sending out these malicious emails, it still seems like Canada is a version of Canada we have never seen. And I'm going to go and say, I don't really like this version of Canada. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage everyone to smash the like button and subscribe if you have already. It does really help grow the channel. I'm talking too fast for my brain to process. We're going to be talking about quite a few things. There's a union leader who's being asked to resign because of some anti-Semitic things that he said here in Canada. You may recognize his face from previous viral videos. You also have, obviously, an update on terrorist activities here in Canada. You also have one of the largest shutouts for a railway strike, kind of, that's happening in Canada. It's also costing taxpayers billions of dollars per day. And then you also have the fact that nuclear weapons are going to be queer, sort of, in America. I know I can't make this up. I wish it wasn't true. I wish I was making shit up. But no, this is the reality of the world we live in. And just like I said yesterday, if you would like to offset the cost of home heating, pay less in carbon tax, you can do so by clicking the link below down in the description or the pinned comment below to get yourself a very nice Freedom or other Freedom hoodies or merch that I sell. Link down below. The hoodies are awesome. They're very well insulated. They're very, very high quality, and they also look extremely fashionable, and it's a great way of supporting this channel. Without further ado, let's get into this video. So the polls are still looking pretty much exactly how they were yesterday. 209 projected seats, bottom line 178, top end 233 for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party. And Justin Trudeau and Liberals are still at 75 projected seats, bottom line 51, top end 101. And then you have 99% likely across the board for the Conservatives to win a majority government and odds of winning the most seats. I'm just going to say that one more time because I've never said it that way. I've always said it, odds of winning the most seats, 99% likely, and odds of winning a majority government, 99% likely. That's just a weird superstitious thing. I've always said it that way that I just did, and I don't want to reverse it because I don't know, knock on wood, I'm just weird like that. Anyways, moving on. In American or worldwide news, you have Taliban spokesperson has said, I am thirsty for war now. I am looking forward to war. We are bored sitting in the office. We are looking forward to war. that's a bit of a scary thing to say, but also that statement does kind of check out with the rise of terrorist threats and terrorist activities across the world. But I'm sure it's nothing to worry about because United States has announced that they are calling on queering nuclear weapons as part of a radical DEI agenda. Now, I know what you're thinking. No way, Mr. Sunshine Baby. Is that a real thing? That's got to be taken out of context, or you're just like exaggerating. I wish that were the case, but no, we try not to do that here. The New York Post has officially put out an article saying Biden administration energy hire called for queering nuclear weapons, claimed discrimination undermines security. You can't make this up. So in the wide-ranging piece, this individual here has argued that queer theory could help change how nuclear practitioners, experts, and the public think about nuclear weapons, as she touched on the sprawling diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology. There it is. The article titled Queering Nuclear Weapons, How LGBTQ plus Inclusion Strengthens Security and Reshapes Discernment, also laid bare her belief that discrimination against queer people could undermine nuclear security and increase nuclear threat. It's about people. Equity and inclusion for queer people is not just a box-ticking exercise in ethics and social justice. It is also essential for creating effective nuclear policy, she wrote in a piece published in the... Okay, so anyways, I don't really have anything other to say than that's a ridiculous idea. When it comes to war, people don't care about your pronouns. And if you are on a battlefield, whatever that looks like in modern day or into the future, no one is going to ask what your pronouns are or who you sleep with before there's a trigger that's pulled. That's just the reality of war. It is non-emotional. It's very binary. No, not like gender binary. It's just black and white. This happened, that happened, and that's it. But yeah, that's the state of the world, folks. Nuclear technology, queering nuclear weapons. Yay, go America, go. Speaking of go America, go, you also have California has advanced on zero down, no payment home loans for undocumented immigrants. Yep, you can't make this up. This is the state of America where illegals have more benefits than law-abiding citizens. And same thing in Canada. I mean, when you're brought into this country through either seeking asylum or you're immigrating here and you have nowhere to go, which seems to be the case for 90+% of the people that just happen to stumble across into Canada, they are received with, they receive like thousands of dollars per month, $5,000-6,000 a month, which is a lot of money for literally just appearing in a country. But I'm sure that's nothing. I'm sure that doesn't contribute to our debt or anything like that. And speaking of craziness, you have Stephen Guilbeault, Canada's radical climate enthusiast, has said, as inflation continues to go down, will Poilievre admit that things aren't broken? The environment and the economy go hand in hand. And so, of course, he's bragging about the fact that since a chart shows from backdated to 2022, where inflation was above 8%, you have the inflation now that was just announced the other day is at 2.5%. And on September 4th, when the Bank of Canada is very, very likely to reduce interest rates, they're going to keep bragging about the fact that, yay, they fixed Canada. And this was just a one-off situation during the coup. It was an exception and everybody should vote for them so they can continue to make life affordable for Canadians, which is just not true. If that were the case, I feel like we wouldn't have gone through as big of a crisis as we did economically. And also, inflation may be at 2.5%, but shit just costs so much money. And government has also come out and said, if you're ever expecting the price of groceries to go down, that's not ever going to happen. The price of everything right now, maybe housing is a bit of an exception to this, is how it's going to be. So if inflation comes down, it just means that it's not going to increase more than 2.5%, but it's still going to remain where it is because, as Jagmeet likes to say, greedy CEOs. I'm just kidding. Because our government sucks and they've mismanaged this country. Yeah, and that's what we're left with. And speaking of mismanaged, let's get into this insane story that has just never happened in Canada. So last night, or I guess early this morning at midnight, 12:01 a.m. early this morning, you had trains across Canada have grounded to a halt as 9,300 workers were locked out by both of Canada's major railways after they have failed to agree on a new contract before said deadline. And it's getting so bad that there's just going to be an insane amount of traffic on the road. So you have here from Hope to Port of Vancouver is going to be extra busy due to the railway shutdowns. There will be lots more trucks. Tourists, please stay in the HOV lane or fast lane in the highway. All right. So what does this look like? What does this mean? Well, CN and CP railway lines are on strike / locked out, shutting down transportation across Canada, costing the Canadian economy approximately $1 billion per day. Where is Justin Trudeau? He's doing photo ops in Quebec. Now, Justin Trudeau has actually issued a statement. We're going to take a look at that in a moment. But first, we're going to play this video here, which was clipped by Government Corrupt on X, that explains a little bit more into detail what this strike or what this shutdown is. It's not actually a strike. It's a shutdown. The companies have said, nope, nobody is working. Whether the employees agree or disagree with that, that's what's happened. But let's take a look at the video.
As two major railways are on the brink of a strike at the same time. That means all the goods that make their way through the country by rail will stop, with no real alternative.
One word, catastrophic. There has never been a rail strike where both carriers went on strike at the same time.
The economic impact would be catastrophic, quite frankly. It's a very unprecedented situation for us.
Normally, these two railways, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City, negotiate their labor contracts in different years to avoid exactly this. But last year, the government gave one company an extension on those negotiations so that it would have time to incorporate new rules that had been imposed on the industry. That means both companies' contracts expired at the same time, and now both are in a position to strike.
Oh gosh, the impact would be huge. We're just not in any shape to manage even a short-term blockade.
So just how disruptive could this be? It's pretty hard to overstate how much gets shipped by rail in this country. Half of Canada's exports go by rail, and 2/3 of all freight that moves through the country, so that's goods shipped by bulk, that also moves by rail. $380 billion worth every year.
The supply chain in Canada is dependent on rail service.
And that rail service is really dependent on two companies, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City. And you can see just how much of the country they serve. There are 43,000 kilometers of railway tracks in Canada. About 50% of those are CN, and 30% are CPKC. The other nearly 20% are passenger trains and local freight trains that, for the most part, operate within a province.
If we had a different scenario, for instance, the grocery store goes on strike. So you don't go to Loblaws, you go to Longo's, you go to Sobeys, you go to whatever other grocery stores. This is a case where there are no others. There's CN and there's CPKC.
Adding fuel to the fire, it's not just rail traffic that gets disrupted. It's also ports, which are critical to the flow of goods, because most of what comes through ports gets shipped by rail. If there are no trains to put that stuff on, the ports get backed up too.
Literally everything will just stop if the railways are not functioning.
That's worth repeating. Literally everything. We're talking goods like TVs and computers, big ticket purchases like cars, natural resources, oil, gas, and potash. Not to mention industrial chemicals, pharmaceuticals, grain. It all goes by rail. And it will be stuck wherever it is in transit. Or it may never leave the producer stores in the first place. That's if they have room for it. Consider the time of year. A lot of farmers are harvesting. 90% of grain produced moves by rail. That's $45 to $50 million worth every day this time of year.
Every day, we lose that capacity to move that product.
Depending on the size of the harvest, and it looks like kind of an average harvest this year, but they won't have enough storage for everything. Nobody can afford to have excess storage just in case. It doesn't make sense.
And maybe you're thinking, okay, Why don't we just take all those goods, those grains for example, and put them on trucks to get them where they need to go? Well, there's a couple problems with that. One is the sheer volume of the shipments. In 2022, nearly 21 million tons of wheat and nearly 7 million tons of canola were moved by rail. That's tens of thousands of tons every day. And think about it this way. It depends on your product, but typically one rail car will haul the equivalent of 4 trucks. And if you have 100 cars on a train, you need 400 trucks to carry the same load. And a lot of these freight trains travel double stacked. Double stacked, double the trucks. Trains are vital for shipping big loads, which is...
And we don't exactly have a tremendous amount of electric trucks. I know that there is a company here in BC, I can't think of it off the top of my head, that has gone ahead and done the conversion of, pickup trucks, but also truck driving trucks, right? They've done that on their own because it has taken so long for the Tesla trucks to come to production and to be able to buy, right? So it doesn't seem like the government is really taking this situation as urgently and as important as they should, because by their own merit, Canada needs to reduce our pollution. We need to reduce our footprint, right? That whole climate change, environmental impact stuff, yada, yada. But then you're seeing this right now, where obviously if the rails go down, which they have, you're going to see more trucks try and compensate with distributing these loads. So why is the government allowing this to happen? If their primary focus is this green agenda, and if their primary focus is actually fighting climate change, don't you think that they would be panicking, going, oh my God, no, we can't. That's a horrible, horrible thing to increase the amount of trucks on the road by 15 or 20% literally overnight to try and compensate for what's just happened with the rail. Oh my God, everybody, DEFCON 17, if that's even a thing, let's go, let's agree on something so that this shutdown doesn't happen. But that obviously wasn't the case. So that just begs the question, what the hell is really going on with the government? Why are they gaslighting us? Why are they trying to push this climate agenda so hard when you just saw the breakdown by CBC? They literally just showed us. One cart is 400 trucks, or they're double stacked, so it's 800 trucks. That's insane. The government is obviously not taking this seriously, which just devalidates a whole bunch of their talking points.
That's why industry depends on it so much, forestry and fuel. There isn't that kind of excess capacity in the trucking industry to just take over those shipments. And when you consider the geography of this country, trucking costs too much, and it takes too long to be any sort of adequate substitute.
Canada's a big country from end to end. Those distances are also greener than trucking and more efficient on a per kilometer basis than trucking, or obviously more cheaper than air.
And sure, shipping things by inland waterways could work if you're in the right part of the country.
Inland waterways, St. Lawrence Seaway, Great Lakes, possible, but it stops at Western Canada. So you're shipping, exporting grain, potash, lumber, coal, mining. There's no other option.
No trucks, no ships, no options.
All right. So this is obviously extremely, new. No one has expected this to happen. I know that they've been talking about getting to this point for a little bit of time, but it seems like the government has really, really dropped the ball right now. And to be honest, it's not really that big of a surprise. And in Justin Trudeau's super busy itinerary, which we just looked at moments before that video, he managed to squeeze in 45 seconds to give to reporters to talk about this today. And that's what we're going to take a look at right now.
I just visited a little incredibly innovative manufacturer here that works for Tesla and others in some really high-performing, high-quality manufacturing. But I talked to us also about the fact that they are going to be impacted if a shutdown of the rail system continues for much longer. And that's something that is an impact right across the country, from workers to businesses to farmers to consumers who are going to be impacted. That's why we are on this. We're taking it so seriously. The minister is engaged directly. We are not taking this lightly, obviously, because Canadians across the country are worried about it, and we will have more to say shortly on what we're doing to make sure that the right solution is found. quickly for the economy.
Right. And not just the economy, though, right, Justin? It's also the environment, because obviously there needs to be some sort of compensation for all of the goods that have now stopped that need to still be distributed and transported. So they've increased production with trucks. But of course, you forgot to somehow mention that, and just somebody sitting behind a camera and a microphone in his own basement was able to tie those things together. But I'm sure at some point in the near future, the Prime Minister of Canada will address the massive concern that this has on our environment, right? Yeah, I just don't think that will happen. But quick to the punch as well is Jagmeet Singh, who has branded himself as the people person, the people's politician. He's fighting for the people. Yay, Jagmeet. At least that's how he tries to brand himself. So he's gone and done some photo ops with people, and he has said this on X. Instead of bargaining today, CN and CPKC chose to lock out 9,300 workers, hurting thousands of families and Canada's economy. Too often, the Liberals and Conservative have rewarded corporate giants like CPKC and CN for locking out workers, fueling their greed. Workers and Canadians deserve better. And that is Jagmeet's entire persona. He is fighting for people, going after corporate greed, not after government incompetence, not after, this could have been potentially avoided if the government had stepped in and done their job and tried to be some sort of mediator or find a resolution. But no, the only time you've really heard this is once it's happened and Jagmeet says, oh man, it's corporate greed, instead of, making comments about it in the lead up to this, which maybe could have, I'm not saying he could have avoided this, but maybe the government could have if they got involved and found some sort of resolution a little bit earlier. But the reporters did stop him and ask him some questions, and this is what he has to say about something that is a little bit different.
Mr. Singh, you said you were asked in French, but in English, if the Liberal government enacts back-to-work legislation, would that be enough for you to pull out of the supply and confidence agreement?
Well, we said at the very beginning, when we forced the Liberals to move forward on things like dental care, when I forced Justin Trudeau to move forward on pharmacare, we said, if you ever think that you could bring in back-to-work legislation and call it a confidence vote, we will vote against that every single time. We made it very clear. So they know we will not support any interference, not just back-to-work legislation, but any interference. If it comes to Parliament, we will be voting against it. We will oppose it. We will make it very clear. We're the only party that will always stand in solidarity with working people.
Jagmeet Singh can do his absolute best to try and brand himself as the people person, but we all know he's just an incompetent little rat. He's a cockroach in the political sphere here in Canada, and he is personally holding 41 plus million Canadians hostage to a government coalition that literally nobody voted for. But I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments about that entire situation, the lockout, and Justin Trudeau's remarks, as well as Jagmeet Singh's. And now we're shifting gears to something that's a little bit more intense. We're talking about crime in Canada and how out of control it's been getting. And you're seeing more and more stories like this one that just popped up in the news today, where the police have located burnt human remains of a real estate agent from Markham who had disappeared earlier this month. And that's just horrifying news to have here in Canada, or just ever. And then you have stuff like this, where BC man was charged for allegedly breaking into a home and groping a woman. And then we're talking about these terrorist activities and terrorist threats to our country. So yesterday, Justin Trudeau went on X and said this about the massive amount, the 100 plus emails that were simultaneously sent out. I'm disgusted at reports that more than 100 Jewish institutions across Canada were targeted by threats today. This is blatant anti-Semitism. The RCMP is in contact with local law enforcement to investigate, and we're working with them to keep Jewish Canadians safe. But when you look at the rise of terrorist activities or terrorist threats in Canada, it's been going on for quite some time, and we're just going to glaze over a couple headlines. The Canadian terrorist supporter who Iran loves, earlier in August. Then you have the father and son that were arrested for being in the final stages of their terrorist activities, right? And then you also have Canadian police thwarted alleged Toronto terror plot. And then today you have an additional terrorist warning where the RCMP say they have laid terrorism charges against suspects from the Greater Toronto area. And then you have another terrorism charge on someone from the Toronto area. RCMP states that allegedly participated in activities of a listed terrorist group and was counseling another person to commit a terrorist offense. So all the terrorists are working to make more terrorists here in Canada, which is, I mean, when you think about it, that like seems to be common sense that would happen, but what the hell is going on? How did they get here? Why is this happening? Why is Canada a target all of a sudden for this amount of terrorism threats and activities that are taking place here in Canada? It doesn't make any sense. And this goes back to my opening statements of this video. This is not the Canada that I grew up in. This is not the Canada that I want right now. And if this is the trajectory, this is definitely not the Canada that, or the version of Canada that I want for my kids as they grow up in this country. It's just extremely, extremely scary. CBC yesterday had this article that they posted where an email was sent out at 5:11 a.m. yesterday to roughly 125 organizations. Well, it's back in the news because today there is what seems to be the RCMP is saying that there's more people that have worked with yesterday's terrorist threats have now done it again. The RCMP is responding to additional bomb threats being made to institutions across Canada today, including synagogues, museums, malls, ports, art galleries, and more. All threats are being rapidly addressed in coordination with police of jurisdiction. Our investigation continues, and we suspect the individuals responsible for yesterday's threats to be responsible for threats received today. The safety and security of Canadians is our top priority. We're working in close partnership with domestic and international police to identify the individuals and disrupt their activities. And if you know you're in immediate harm, call 911. If you have any more information, call those numbers below. It just seems like it's spiraling out of control. And here's what CTV has to say about the latest update today.
We're tracking the latest on bomb threats that were sent to Jewish organizations and synagogues in cities across Canada. More than 100 identical emails were received at 5 a.m. Eastern. Jewish groups are saying enough is enough. CTV's Heather Wright is standing by outside of one building in Toronto that was evacuated earlier today. Heather, bring us up to speed here.
Well, yes, this is one of a number of buildings here in Toronto where police came. They evacuated people from the building. They did a sweep of the building to see if there were, in fact, any bombs that had been planted inside there. And then they gave the all clear. Now, this all, as you mentioned, Todd, stems from a mass email that was sent at about 5 a.m. this morning. The email has been described as callous, as concerning, as frightening. I've had an opportunity to see a screenshot of the email, and quite frankly, it is all of those things. They aren't making it public because this is an ongoing investigation, but it is something that was sent to, as you mentioned, 100 plus groups across the country, a number of hospitals in the Ottawa area. But as it was pointed out to me, the majority of the recipients were Jewish organizations, and they do say enough is enough. They cite a rising tide of anti-Semitism in this country, and this most recent incident being another example. Now, they don't know whether there's any credibility to these emails. Of course, police have to investigate them as such, but they say that these are really designed to intimidate, to stoke fear, to bring chaos to the work that these groups are doing. And as one group said in a statement, they say, we will be vigilant, but we will never be intimidated. We do know that the RCMP is taking the lead on this investigation, and a number of leaders have spoken out, including the Prime Minister, who said he is disgusted by this incident today, calling it blatant anti-Semitism. Todd.
So it seems like all of the terrorist threats quite recently in Canada, they're all directed towards one objective, targeting Jewish organizations, Jewish schools, Jewish hospitals. And I'm going to go out here and say that maybe this could have something to do with the fact that the government has not only brought in a bunch of Jewish people, and we have a lot of Jewish people that have lived in Canada for a very long time, but also people that don't like Jewish people. They've brought them in a lot here in Canada, not to mention the amount of undisclosed amount as of right now of refugees or people that have sought asylum coming out of Gaza, which I'm sure they're not very happy with Jewish people or Israel, as well as the thousands, the hundreds, the borderline thousands of protests that are all pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, anti-Jewish, however one you look at it, that the government has encouraged, right? Jagmeet Singh, leader of the NDP, has said, I stand with the Palestinian supporters and protesters. So Justin Trudeau on one hand is going, how are there so many attacks on Jewish people in Jewish schools and all that stuff? Jagmeet is going, power to Palestinians. And it just seems like a bizarre world. But I would love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Also, can we just stop all the terrorist activities? You know what? The government should make it illegal. That'll stop it, just like guns and gun crime. Next up, we have this insane story. So Doug Ford has said, I applaud Coup National for asking Fred Hand to step down. Now it's time for Fred to put his members first and do the right thing by resigning from all his positions to leadership. And he's the vice president, or he's the president of Coup National, right? And it's just kind of crazy because this guy has said, or this person, I don't know, he's a guy, has said some very unhinged things on camera, just extremely radical. And it seems like everybody's taking this time right now to shit on this person and get them fired. It's like cancel culture working on the people that have started cancel culture. It's very ironic how that has happened.
Good, thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Fred, does QP stand shoulder to shoulder with Antifa?
It's weird when people ask me about Antifa because, like, do you think we're pro-fascist? That's weird. Okay, we're done.
So you do stand shoulder to shoulder with Antifa?
Well, would you expect us to be pro-fascist? Are you pro-fascist? Are you pro-fascist?
No. Antifa is
anti-fascist.
A militant
you're
organization.
You're pro-fascist or you're anti-fascist.
So QP stands shoulder to shoulder with Antifa then. I have that right?
I know. Have precedence over parents for decision making of kids?
Thanks for letting me know.
Should unions and teachers be able to make decisions for kids? Or should their parents?
Good, thanks so much.
Right. And so it just seems like this person right here is going to be out of a job very, very soon. But we're going to have to wait and see how that plays out. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of an extremely long video. I hope there were some very important things that you got to learn from this. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments about any of the points or the stories that were brought up. And of course, on your way out, I would like to encourage you guys to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.